Who are some of the best fits for the open Louisville men's basketball head coaching position? We will answer that here on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sportszone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time, as always, to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. We're diving back into coaching search talk for the open Louisville men's basketball head coaching position, discussing some of the best fits for the job. We will start out talking about New York Knicks assistant Kenny Payne and Arkansas head coach Eric Musselman. We will then transition into Wake Forest head coach Steve Forbes and Oregon head coach Dana Altman. And then finally, we will dive into the weekly mailbag segment. We'll start out talking about Kenny Payne and Eric Musselman. But first, I want to say some stuff for the record so things don't get taken the wrong way or anything like that. I am in no way, campaigning for, any of these four guys. This is merely just an episode that is discussing why each would be a good fit for the program. I am not saying that they are the only good fits for the program. There are a plethora of, college coaches out there that would be great options for the university should they, choose to bring said coaches to the university to take over the program. There really hasn't been a ton of news or developments in the coaching search. Most people have been led to believe that Kenny Payne is probably the overwhelming favorite, especially among the fans and the former players. But in reality, there hasn't been a ton of leaks or anything like that. At the end of the day, like I said, I'm not campaigning for any of the candidates out there. I'm merely just looking at this from, an outside looking in perspective on why each of these candidates would be a solid fit for the program. At the end of the day, I have full confidence that interim athletic director Josh Hurd and those responsible for helping make the decision for the next hiring of the head men's basketball coach. I have the utmost confidence in them for, getting the best candidate for the position to put Louisville back into a prominent level, among the national landscape. So let's get right on into it, talking about, Kenny Payne and Eric Musselman. We will start with the former. Kenny Payne is probably the overwhelming fan favorite. As I mentioned, there hasn't been a lot of talk about, possible options. Bruce Pearl, his name was brought up kind of early on, but those talks were kind of squashed with him signing a big, pretty much a lifetime contract or a lifetime extension with the Auburn Tigers. I know Josh Hurd was on, I think it was 93.9 The Ville, talking about, possible timeline. And he mentioned that it seems like something that would probably, obviously paraphrasing, it seems like, April would be kind of too late for a hire. The sooner the better. It seemed like the vibe that we got from that, media appearance. So we'll believe after the season, theoretically will end after the ACC tournament that Louisville would likely move quick to hire the next coach. If that's the case, if they're going to hire it, a couple days or, even a week or so after their final game and after the season ends, it would, kind of point back to it being Kenny Payne, considering the fact that, most of the other guys that have bบtalked about would still likely be coaching or gearing up to coach in the NCAA tournament. So kind of a weird timing there for a coach to accept, a position while also coaching in, an NCAA tournament game or possibly going far. Beginning with Kenny Payne, as I mentioned, the timeline, if that is the timeline, it would make sense for Kenny Payne, probably being the guy. But like I said, that's all speculation at this point. I'm not saying one way or the other, or that I know any, type of inside information or anything like that. Kenny Payne would be, a great hire for the university, because I think that he fills a lot of needs that this program is in need of. So, so far heading into next season. Number one, that's the recruiting aspect. A very good recruiter at the University of Kentucky. There has been rumors about, DJ Wagner, possibly, the number one recruit in the 2023 class, a possible reclassify. Now, obviously, this is just speculation. There's some other, recruits that have been talked about, possible reclassifications as well if Kenny Payne were to be hired. As I mentioned, just speculation, but the recruiting aspect, he definitely fills that need of, being able to vamp up the recruiting effort. From a coaching perspective, this is kind of maybe the biggest risk, so to speak, with him having never been a head coach. But when you look at the places he's been, an assistant at, with the New York Knicks, an assistant at the University of Kentucky, he's turned down head coaching positions in the past. So, and he has been directly linked with, the player development of, some of the former Kentucky players like Willie Cauley-Stein, Julius Randle, Karl Anthony Towns, so on and so forth. All have spoken pretty highly of Payne. And then guys with the Knicks right now, R.J. Barrett, Julius Randle, etc. Both were able to, see some more development in their respective games with Kenny Payne on staff up in the Big Apple. So the player development aspect of things, I think he specializes in terms of big men development and stuff like that. That's something that would be pretty big, but kind of the biggest risk, because there hasn't been a ton of, hints as to what, the X's and O's would look like. What would the identity of the team be? Is there an identity? Are they going to be, a fast-paced team? Or are they going to be a team that focuses mainly on defense and kind of, uses that to throttle their offense? And those questions are yet to be answered. So you have to look at things from all ends of the spectrum. But I think, recruiting, I also think that one of the main things that maybe only a handful of other coaches would be able to bring to the table. And I think that is the unification or the reunification of the fan base of this program, of, people in the university, of getting a national champion, 1986 national champion, a guy that former players love, boosters love, etc. Getting a guy like Kenny Payne in here would do wonders for mending over, the division throughout the fan base, and obviously the recruiting, the player development. There's a lot of signs that I think point to Kenny Payne being a successful collegiate head basketball coach. There is some, risk involved, but at the end of the day, I think that if you're going to consider any, non-head coach in this search, a guy that has never been a head coach, Kenny Payne is really the only one that fits that category. Excuse me. Move on into Arkansas's Eric Musselman. He kind of brings a little bit of a different, advantage to the table, because I think that, he does have the head coaching pedigree, throughout his career. He has had a 75% win-loss percentage, most notably at Arkansas the past 3 seasons. Didn't make the tournament the first year due to COVID. No one made the tournament. They were 20-12, so I'm not really sure if they would have been on the bubble or not, or what their tournament outlook was looking like. Last year they were a 3 seed, 25-7. Had a little bit of a bumpy start this year. They are 23-6, and they are primed to possibly make another run at Nevada. Had 4 winning seasons, taking over in 2015. 24-14 the first year. The next 3 years, he makes the NCAA tournament. I think that in opposition to Payne's case for the position, he may have the head coaching experience. The recruiting aspect is there. He's recruiting very well at Arkansas. He may not necessarily be able to unify the fan base like Payne would. Maybe the possibility of DJ Wagner and some other high-profile recruits kind of go out the window a little bit. But ultimately, I think that Eric Musselman is a very solid X's and O's coach. This is from Trey Biddy over at 24/7 Sports on the Arkansas page. He had a great post, I think it's hogsports.com, back when Arkansas hired Musselman, and this is a kind of reveals a little bit of his coaching philosophy, and I'll quote this first paragraph. Musselman said he wants to play fast and get a lot of freedom. They will shoot a lot of three-pointers and try to get to the basket to shoot a lot of free throws, but he will tailor things to his personnel. He likes to gamble with discipline and intelligence on defense. I think to where it said that Arkansas was 24-2 against top 25 opposition when or in his tenure at in Fayetteville. Obviously, I can't confirm that. Maybe I read something wrong, but I believe that was the case. I think that he brings a big fire around the program. Very fiery personality, very flamboyant, so to speak, very vibrant in his personality. We saw when Arkansas defeated Auburn at Bud Walton, which is a very, very wired arena in that atmosphere. It was incredible. He took his shirt off. He showed the fire. He's very unapologetic about his unwavering confidence about his program. And I'm not saying that other coaches aren't, but the way that he carries himself, it's one of those where fans love him, but opposing fans can't stand him, and I think that's characteristic of a really, really, really good coach. I think that getting that identity back to very what's the word I'm looking for? That I just had the word on the tip of my tongue. The kind of contagious, I guess you could say, that contagious vibe around the program. I think that's what this program has been lacking, and obviously playing fast with good offense. That's another thing that a lot of fans would welcome. So Eric Musselman would be a great option along with Kenny Payne. They both bring great qualities they would bring great qualities to the program. But ultimately, I think that those two have kind of been talked about the most. Some others that haven't necessarily been talked about a lot, that's Wake Forest's Steve Forbes, Oregon's Dana Altman. We'll talk about why those two specifically would be good fits for the job after we talk about our friends at Run Your Pool. March Madness is only about a couple weeks away. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual, or are you looking for the best? We've done our homework here, and we're running brackets with RunYourPool.com. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. Both are really fun in their own way, and they have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks, all the stuff you won't find at CBS or ESPN. Clearly, we personally believe that Run Your Pool is the best out there because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Bracket Breakdown, March 14th, right here on the Locked On Louisville podcast feed and YouTube channel. College basketball experts Chris Gordy, Andy Patton, and betting expert Lee Sterling give you in-depth breakdowns on every single matchup in the field. Switching over into two other candidates that haven't necessarily been talked about a lot in this respective Louisville men's basketball head coaching search, but I do think that they would be pretty solid options. I think that they would probably be some of the best fits as well. That is Wake Forest head coach Steve Forbes and Oregon head coach Dana Altman. We'll start out with the former. Steve Forbes has completely turned Wake Forest around. He arguably may be one of the best X's and O's guys in college basketball. I truly believe that for what he has done at every stop of his coaching career. Most notably, he started out, was an assistant under Bruce Pearl at Tennessee, an assistant at Wichita State with those great teams, the teams that played Louisville in the Final Four, the undefeated regular season team. Then got his chance at a head coaching position at East Tennessee State, was there for 5 seasons, made the NCAA tournament. In one of those, probably they would have made it in 2019-20, but COVID obviously had 5 winning seasons, only 2 seasons with double-digit losses. Took over a Wake Forest program that was arguably one of the worst in the ACC. They went 6-6 their first year. And in this current season, he has turned this program around to a 22-8 record. He has a 70% win percentage. From an X's and O's perspective, I think that he would be one of the best fits out there. There was a piece by The Athletic on Steve Forbes when he it was actually less than a calendar year ago, back in June, that I found some very interesting tidbits on the way that he conducts, his philosophy around his programs and stuff like that. He basically looking into a couple of things and how to really get into this. He's a big guy that he's a guy that's big into team bonding and stuff like that. So when COVID hit, obviously it made things a little challenging. Offensively, there's a ton of motions, a lot of motion in the way that he runs offense. Defensively, they're very active on ball. He was quoted on saying that defensive rebounds wins championships. But he basically will base the identity of his team, based upon the personnel and stuff like that. And one thing that I found very, very interesting that I really think is kind of what this program needs is an identity on the court. He says, he quotes it with, "Identity is more important than that, and they know what it is. But as far as the technical side of basketball, I want to continue to run motion." He basically just goes on and says that defending is a huge aspect of the way he coaches. He's very fluent, or I guess you could say fluid, in the way that he coaches, really just kind of based upon the personnel of his team and the respective strengths that his collective team bring to the table. But ultimately, I think that the focus on having your team coming to terms with their identity is big, because it allows you to maximize your production on the court, because you know what your strengths are, you know what your weaknesses are, you know what to work on, and you know what to kind of refine and polish. So, and I think that that's one thing that this Louisville team in particular all season, it's like it's a team that's still trying to figure out, what are our strengths? What is our identity on the court? Are we a team that shoots a lot of threes? Are we a team that should be prioritizing slashing to the basket? It just seems like this team is, one game left in the season, and we're still trying to figure out, okay, what are the strengths of this Louisville men's basketball team? And the fact that, having that, that emphasis on wanting to grasp, what, a certain identity is of the team on the court. That's something that's big for the program. Recruiting wise, I'm not necessarily sure how good of a recruiter. I don't necessarily think that he would be on Kenny Payne or Eric Musselman level, but the way that he's able to develop talent, Alondez Williams, arguably, in my opinion, the ACC Player of the Year. The way that he's turned around this program, he's won everywhere that he's been. Wake Forest is likely going to be in the tournament field. Obviously, kind of a small sample size in Winston-Salem, but ultimately, I really think that he would be a good fit, especially from an X's and O's perspective. Another guy from a play calling and, expertise in terms of, drawing sets and late game, clock management and all that good stuff. Oregon head coach Dana Altman. There really has been a lot of talk about, Dana and pertains to this respective coaching search. I just think that he would be a great fit for this job. He's one of the best and really one of the most underrated coaches in college basketball. Kind of looking into it, Daniel, I think it's Uthman from USA Today Sports, had a piece on him back in 2016 where he interviewed Dylan Brooks, who's now starting guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, and had some quotes from him saying, and I quote, "Coach always says he recruits you for your versatility, that you can do a lot more things than the average player can do. You don't have one skill set, you have 3-4 skill sets that you can play anyway." So what I took that as is, in an era of positionless basketball, it's key that you have guys that can do a lot of different things, because we're no longer in times where, you have a point guard, you have a shooting guard, you have a small forward, you have a power forward, you have a center. It's a lot more complex than that. A guy that embraces positionless basketball and has, versatility on offense, switchability on defense, where, all of the Oregon teams that he's coached have been very solid defensively. They've been pesky on ball. And I think that, he's had a ton of success here, or a ton of success in Eugene. 3-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year, 15 tournament appearances, made one Final Four back in 2017 as kind of an underdog Cinderella team. Very, very solid team with I'm trying to think of who some of those guys were. Jordan Bell, Dylan Brooks, so on and so forth. He's been at Oregon since 2010, has yet to have a losing season, has yet to have, outside of his first year, has had no more than 13 losses in a given season. So he's made the NCAA tournament, hasn't won an NCAA title or anything like that, but none of the coaches on this list have. Not many in college basketball really have either, when you kind of break it down and think about it. But from an X's and O's perspective, he's been kind of revered as one of the best coaches in crunch time, great at drawing up sets on offense. Defensively, we talked about, very attentive to the, down to the smallest detail, and really puts emphasis on on-ball defense and stuff like that. Ultimately, just the commitment to embracing positionless basketball and recruiting versatility. At Oregon, he's recruited some, high-profile recruits. X's and O's wise, I think, you bring that stability to this Louisville program and have a, very solid play caller and stuff like that. I think that can maximize the roster. And, ultimately, it really comes down to, his fiery personality as well. He's kind of got like an Eric Musselman-like personality, very animate on the sidelines, very animate in press conferences. I believe that I think it might have been Jeff Goodman from Watch Stadium said that he didn't believe that Dana Altman would be a good fit culture-wise for Louisville. And I remember on the first episode that I talked about Altman, I was kind of questioning, like, what does that mean? Not necessarily saying that he's wrong, but I think that really I would disagree by saying that there's a lot of things that Altman brings to the table that would be welcomed here at Louisville. Number one, the stability in terms of play calling, the fire about him, the tenacity, the, solid recruiting, and the ultimate, really just kind of the ultimate embracing of positionless basketball. I think that's a key thing in today's, collegiate realm, and also, in the pro aspect as well. So, like I said, great fits, not campaigning for any of the four, just basically saying, basically explaining why they would be good fits. At the end of the day, I have utmost confidence in Josh Hurd and company to make the right hire that this program needs. We'll transition it over into the final segment of the show, the weekly mailbag. There's a couple questions I want to get to, a couple pertaining to this search in particular. We'll talk about that here in just a second, answer those questions after we talk about our friends at BetOnline. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is your number one spot for all of your sports sporting needs and remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Couple questions in this week's mailbag segment. Obviously, there was not episodes on Tuesday, Wednesday. I definitely apologize for that. Back in action today, though, so I want to get into the mailbag, answer some questions. The first one is dedicated to the coaching search. It's in relation to Eric Musselman. It kind of goes based upon what do you think Eric Musselman brings to the table, or what does Eric Musselman bring to the table that you value the most in terms of this possible coaching search? Actually, I kind of forgot to mention this, and that's the fact that I think he does a very good job of taking a mesh of transfers and newcomers and helping them play cohesively as a rotation and as a team. He's done it everywhere he's been. Starting out at Nevada, he had the Martin brothers. Jordan Caroline transferred in, had a handful of transfers. I think 8 transfers came in, and after the run that he made in 2018, and they ended up going pretty decently for in 2019 as well. So, and then Arkansas, with there's being some highly rated recruits. He's gotten some other transfers to come in. Trying to think of a couple off the top of my head. Chris Likes from Miami being one of them, transferring into the program. There's been a handful of guys that have come in and played really well, and they've cohesively meshed. That's something that just didn't happen for the Louisville Cardinals this year. Brought a lot of guys in, just unfortunately didn't mesh. So in an era of the transfer portal where, there's a one-time free transfer, or one-time immediate free transfer, recruiting and reclassifying, stuff like that, having a guy that specializes in taking a lot of transfers, a lot of incoming recruits, and meshing them with the returning guys and creating a cohesive rotation and having those guys play together. That's something that not a lot of coaches can do, and that's something that I think that Eric Musselman brings to the table, whether that is for this respective coaching search or really what makes him a special coach. But I think that the ability to get guys to play together, despite some being the guy at their previous stop, being role players that need to kind of step into star roles. He does a great job of that. So second question, this is pertaining to the football recruiting weekend that is coming up. Big weekend in the Ville. A handful of 4-star guys, some big name recruits coming in, along with quarterback recruit Pierce Clarkson, the Cardinal commit. The question is, do you expect any commitments to result from the visits this weekend, and if so, how many? All of them. No, I'm playing. I don't think we're gonna see a run like we did at in February or late January with the I think it was January. And I feel like the time's just going by so fast in 2022, but I digress. I don't think we're going to see a run to where we see 7 commits in a couple of days. I do think that we should be expecting some commits. I would expect some guys to commit, or I would expect some guys to commit after their visits. I'm not going to give out any names or anything like that. I've heard some good news on a couple guys that are visiting this weekend. I'm not sure if it's going to be an immediate commitment after the weekend or during the weekend, but I do think that some of these guys that are coming this weekend will ultimately be Cardinals, in this Flyville 2020 or Flyville 23 recruiting class. Final question in the mailbag. Which player is most I don't know how this is where it's worded. It's worded in a weird way. It's kind of I don't know how to phrase this word. Okay. Which women's basketball player do you think needs to have the biggest performance throughout the ACC tournament for the Cardinals to hang or to cut down the banner? Not hang the banner, but to cut down the net, I should say. I don't necessarily think it's a one player. I don't think it's a one-player ordeal. As we've seen, this is a very balanced team. They don't necessarily have one star. They have a handful of very solid players, a good nucleus of star players, so to speak. If I had to pick one player, I'd say Kiana Smith. We saw when she was able to get going again, against Notre Dame in the final game of the regular season. Now, I'm not saying that she is the only reason why the Cardinals were up 41 or 43-4 at one point in that first half. But I do think that when Kiana Smith is on, when she's shooting the ball well, when she's scoring, high numbers, you know what you're getting consistently from, Haley Van Lith in conference play. Emily Ingsler is, very solid as well. I think if Kiana Smith is scoring big time, then it puts this team on a new level. It gives them a different dynamic. So I'm going to go with Kiana Smith. But that's going to basically wrap up this mailbag of the show. I want to say thank you for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. A couple quick shout-outs first to the Cardinal Sportszone podcast. You can check out the most recent episode at cardinalsportszone.com. And just a reminder, for those that listen to the episode, first of all, thank you. Second of all, like I said, this wasn't an episode of me campaigning for any one candidate. This was merely just a discussion on why each of the four that have been brought up in this episode would be some of the best fits for the program. I want to reiterate that I have the utmost confidence in Josh Hurd and company to select the right candidate. Obviously, the good fits aren't limited to the four talked about on this episode. There are a plethora of coaches out there that would be great fits as well. Whoever Josh Hurd and company go with, hopefully the fan base will rally around. I'm tired of seeing the fan base so divided and broken in terms of unification and stuff like that. I have full confidence in the athletic department to make the right hire, and I'm very interested to see who and when that hire will be made. But that's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here tomorrow. Go Cards.